Hi guys, so I'm back with chapter 33. There are more questions for this chapter than before. My disclaimer again, I don't know if everything I say is fully correct, but I'm pretty sure it kind of is. Okay, let's get started so we can do this quickly. We're going to be talking about anemias, or not really a lot of anemias, just 2 anemias, and then hemophilia and DIC. Iron deficiency anemia. It's the most common anemia. It is a depletion of iron stores typically from bleeding. Sure, you can have a depletion of iron stores from not eating proper or foods that are high in iron. This is not as common as iron deficiency from bleeding. Low iron equals less hemoglobin, and less hemoglobin equals less oxygen carriers. So, when there's low iron stores, that means there's less hemoglobin floating around, and with less hemoglobin floating around, there is not as much carriers for oxygen. Iron supplements should not be taken with meals unless individual has upset stomach. Iron supplements, when taken with foods, their absorption is decreased by 50%. Okay? It should not be taken with dairy products or antacids. And antacid is just calcium, and dairy products is calcium. I did read that if you suspect somebody's having like if somebody took too much iron and you think they're they overloaded on iron so they have iron toxicity, you should be able to kind of give them calcium, and it should decrease or cancel out that iron, or cancel the absorption of iron or something like that. But it has to be given to them within a reasonable time. Otherwise, it'll just be too late. So foods with iron, I just came up with an acronym. It's called BLOOMR. BLOOMR. B for beans, L for leafy vegetables, O for organ meats, O for other meats. So M for molasses, and R for raisins. Sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is caused by when somebody has a sickle hemoglobin gene, and that causes hemoglobin molecule to be defective. So this gene will kind of fuck with the hemoglobin. So it will fuck with its ability to carry oxygen. Sickle cells also rapidly hemolyze. So what that means is that their lifespan is drastically decreased. The normal cell average lifespan is 120 days. These cells, I think, last for 20 days max. It's stupid. That, along with the other problems that sickle cells cause. So these cells, with their points, since they're sickle shaped, it's easier for them to grab onto vessel walls, and this accumulation, of cells on these walls can narrow the vessel pathway, or the pathway for blood to go through. And what happens with that? So that means that less blood is getting to where it needs to be, and less oxygen is getting to where it needs to be. So, for example, less oxygen get to the brain. That's why people with sickle cell anemia are at increased risk for strokes, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So cold causes extra problems for people with sickle cell anemia, because not only does the sickle cell cause the narrowing of the vessels, but the cold causes vasoconstrictions, and then you have even more narrowing. Okay? Vaso-occlusive crisis. So this is just a very painful thing. Very painful crisis that happens with sickle cell individuals with sickle cell, and this is vaso-occlusive crisis causes tissue hypoxia and inflammation. That's what causes sickle cell, the vaso-occlusive crisis. So it's caused by tissue hypoxia and inflammation. And this is again caused by the narrowing of the vessels from the cells latching onto them. The chronic anemia is associated with tachycardia, cardiac murmurs, and often enlarged heart. Complications of sickle cell anemia include infection, stroke, renal failure, impotence, heart failure, and pulmonary hypertension. Hemophilia. I have a picture here for you guys, and I guess I'll talk about that in a bit. So hemophilia is manifested by hemorrhages into various parts of the body. When the hematomas occur within a muscle, particularly in the extremities, Peripheral nerves can be compressed. So hemophilia basically is our platelets are not really doing a good job. Our clotting factors are not doing a good job at clotting the damaged vessels. So there's two types of hemophilia. There's hemophilia A and hemophilia B. Hemophilia A is due to a deficiency in clotting factor 8, and hemophilia B is due to a deficiency of clotting factor 9. I remember that by thinking A sounds like 8, so 8. So, yeah. And then B is for 9. And the thing is, during the clotting process, our body goes through a sequence, or the clotting happens in a sequence, and when one of the dominoes in this sequence is fucked up, the blood or the clotting factor doesn't work, or the blood clots don't work as well. And so then you'll see somebody might stop bleeding, and then afterwards they'll just start bleeding again. And that's kind of what happens with hemophilia. And they just keep bleeding. So, 75% of hemorrhages episodes occur in the joints. I think the one thing that helps me remember that is I just feel like joints kind of take a lot of, stress. So they're most likely to be exposed to trauma. Recurrent joint hemorrhages can result in damage so severe that chronic pain, ankylosis, or arthropathy of the joints occurs. So, okay, and then so hemophilia is mainly diagnosed in children, and we, as nurses, we should probably recommend that they should avoid contact sports because we do not want them to, hurt themselves or expose themselves to any physical trauma. DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation. This is an increase in clotting that leads to increase in bleeding. So one thing that I just think about is our body is using all of its resources to clot these traumas that have happened on these vessels. And because of that, it has run out of resources for the next thing that happens. Okay? So DIC may be triggered by sepsis, trauma, cancer, shock, toxins, allergic reactions, and other conditions. So DIC alone is not actually a disease. It is like something that happens because of a disease. So again, this happens because our body is using a lot of its resources to clot. And because of that, because of its low resources, the next traumatic thing that happens, next physically traumatic thing that happens, or whatever happens, it will not be able to clot that really well, and a lot of bleeding will occur. Thank you. I hope this helps somewhat. Bye-bye.